We all know what makes a good Spider-Man movie.
Now dig on this.
But what about a quality Spider-Man game? Jumping into the digital shoes of Peter Parker's alter ego has been present in arcade cabinets and home consoles since the very inception of gaming, and with the announcement of Insomniac's own interpretation of the beloved comic book hero, I wanted to find out what makes a good Spider-Man game. I decided to stick to more recent Spider-Man titles that I felt would give me a better idea of how the character operates in 3D, or more importantly, what design and narrative decisions should and should not make their way into Insomniac's upcoming release. With help from Francois Taddei, a designer on Shattered Dimensions and Edge of Time, I'll be able to find out what it takes to bring Spider-Man to life. Spider-Man 2000 is an admirable first step in bringing the webhead into 3D. Environments are linear, though commodious enough to offer the player a flexible freedom of movement. Combat, on the other hand, is borderline non-existent, leaving you aimlessly swinging at enemies, praying your attacks make contact. Using your web in combat is far more effective though, both for its long range and emphasis on pacifism. The web-slinging mechanic would eventually see a variety of incarnations, and while Spider-Man 2000 feels antiquated compared to later Spider-Man titles, the web-slinging here is serviceable and does feel imperative to the level design. Most notable from this adaptation is its focus on a comic book aesthetic, that is if you're not considering the title screen's music, of course. Each level is foreshadowed with its own comic book cover, and visually the art direction is lifted straight out of the comics, mixing vibrant colours with stylized character designs. Spider-Man 2000 is hardly a tour de force for the web-slinger, but mechanically his unique skill set is faithfully represented, and as a result this serves as an essential first step in bringing the icon to 3D. It's also interesting to note that Spider-Man was developed by Neversoft. I wonder if I've talked about any of their games recently. 2 years later, audiences saw the release of Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man film, and with it the inescapable movie-to-game tie-in. Spider-Man 2002 shares a wealth of its precursors' design elements and an identical control scheme, just with a new coat of paint. Surprisingly, web-slinging has taken a step backwards, now an uneventful, on-rails affair. This is definitely due to its more stilted animation and lack of any weight behind your movement. Ultimately, it's the overall lack of original ideas that makes Spider-Man 2002 the weaker game compared to its precursor. Graphical improvements aside, there is little to speak of in Spider-Man 2002. Combat is bland, meeting the minimum requirements for a 3D beat-em-up. I did appreciate the attempt to employ stealth mechanics, but ultimately they are a useless novelty that adds nothing to gameplay. By 2002, we'd been given a glimpse of how Spider-Man could operate in 3D. Though limited to linear hallways and closed-off cityscapes, it was yet to be seen how the character would fare in an open world. After the release of GTA 3 in 2001, developers everywhere were itching to try their hands at their own digital sandboxes, and it was only a matter of time before Spider-Man would get his own. Spider-Man 2 proved that a pure, unadulterated Spider-Man experience was finally possible. The simple but satisfying web-slinging was a revelation of how Spider-Man games could be played. The open world of Manhattan would serve as the playground for the player to finally fulfill the role of Spider-Man. While incredibly basic on the surface, the combat system accommodated a bevy of attacks and some hilariously over-exaggerated ragdoll physics. An extensive list of combat and web-slinging upgrades also gave life to a diverse set of combos and acrobatic maneuvers. Spider-Man 2 was such a watershed moment for the series because at long last the player was given Spider-Man's entire moveset and set loose upon a sprawling city. The ability to be swinging from building to building one moment only to fend off a horde of thugs the next was exhilarating compared to the previously linear Spider-Man titles of old. The third pillar of Spider-Man 2's success was its open world. While bereft of any distinct environmental design, the city itself did feel far more dynamic than most contemporary open world games. Crimes occurred in real time and made you feel like an integral figure in the city's ecosystem. Repetitive, sure, but the ability to save hanging denizens and extinguish crime was still effective in making you feel like Spider-Man. Early sections of the game even explore the conflict Spider-Man faces between his commitments as Peter Parker and the responsibility he possesses as Spider-Man.
Can't believe I'm running so late. Still, I should be able to make it as long as...
Help me!
Right on cue. I was almost there, too. Sorry, Dr. Connors.
Other Spider-Man titles fail to illustrate this even through cutscenes, while Spider-Man 2 manages to present this internal struggle through its gameplay.
I wish I could tell Harry and MJ the truth, but how could I?
Hey, Spidey! Yeah, I'm talking to you!
The commercial and critical success of Spider-Man 2 firmly cemented the blueprints for a successful open-world Spider-Man game. The more salient question, though, was how the series would continue to evolve. Taking inspiration from the comic book of the same name, Ultimate Spider-Man was able to perfectly capture the look of the comics, all the while building on Spider-Man 2's mechanics. Similar to Spider-Man 2000, the use of comic book covers creates a sense of continuity with the source material. The addition of a glossy, cel-shaded art style is a perfect fit for the universe, introducing slick comic panels to inject a much-needed cinematic flair to the narrative. The diverse roster of characters also makes effective use of Marvel's eclectic IPs, even adding Venom as a playable character. Combat still consists of pallid button mashing, but manages to retain its simple charm with the inclusion of more fluent animations. Also, having to web downed enemies to the ground is a great addition to gameplay that adds another layer to feeling like Spider-Man. The open world retains its spontaneous crimes, though where Ultimate Spider-Man fails is how it doles out story missions to the player, requiring you to win races, complete fighting challenges, and collect tokens around the city before you can progress. Spider-Man 2 used an almost identical system, but here it's far more blatant that the developers want to make the secondary objectives seem more integral to the experience, even if they feel like an afterthought. This feeds into the real conundrum of developing a fun and believable open world. How does one create objectives that blur the lines between primary and secondary? Racing between beacons and mindlessly fighting waves of enemies is fun, but how does it have anything to do with the next story tidbit? Ultimate Spider-Man is in no way an egregious example of an open world, but this formula, while previously successful in Spider-Man 2, needs to be transformed in Insomniac's interpretation. Spider-Man's first two forays into the sandbox genre had been incredibly successful, but not without their flaws. The true challenges of creating dynamic open worlds was becoming apparent, and as the next generation of home consoles landed in 2005, fans were eager to see how the webhead would transition to more powerful hardware. Spider-Man Web of Shadows is painfully underwhelming. A retooled combat system is a definite upgrade over previous titles, though almost every other aspect of the experience is utterly dull. A half-assed morality system that only amounts to different cutscenes, an empty, ugly city, and one of the worst stories I've ever had the misfortune of viewing.
Where's Cage and his search party?
Who?
The civilian volunteers! Pretty redhead, armed and aghast! You are no help!
Hold that APC! We got vehicles inbound!
Thankfully, the combat system does offer some original ideas, that is, until they get boring. Using your web to zip between enemies is satisfying the first 10 times, but after the game requires you to do it over and over and over again, the design begins to feel stale. The repetitive objectives I addressed in Ultimate Spider-Man have become even more monotonous. You'll be asked to mindlessly defeat enemies on a street corner, only to be then told to do the exact same thing just a few hundred meters away, only to go back to the same exact location to complete the same objective. Rarely is repetition this shameless. Web slinging still feels intuitive, but certainly hasn't evolved, and trivial inclusions like the aforementioned morality system are hollow. I guess they figured that the black Spider-Man suit worked so well in Spider-Man 3 that they had to try it here. Do we need to go over this again?
Now dig on this.
Ultimately, Web of Shadows lacks polish and any serious thought put into its open world. It's hard to feel satisfied defeating droves of rehashed thugs when the citizens you are supposedly saving are absent from the equation. Spider-Man has to feel the weight of his responsibility and who that responsibility belongs to. When you have stylish combat that is in service of nothing except looking cool, your connection with the city is going to deteriorate. Web of Shadows also borrows moments straight out of Spider-Man 2, such as chasing Black Cat through the city. In fact, Spider-Man 2000, Spider-Man 2, and Web of Shadows all portray Black Cat in revealing clothing. I think it's fair to say she hasn't been explored as a character so far. Web of Shadows proved it was very possible to create a bad open-world Spider-Man game, and that the formula was desperately in need of innovation. The poor sales of Web of Shadows made it seem possible that Spider-Man may even ditch the sandbox and return to more confined, linear environments. In 2011, Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions chose to do away with the now exhausted open-world formula in lieu of more detailed linear environments. Now in control of 4 separate Spider-Men, Ultimate, Spectacular, 2099, and Noir, the focus on exploration was marginalized and emphasis was placed on combat and stealth. A designer on Shattered Dimensions, Francois Taddei understood the difficulty of bringing the character back into linear environments.
Well, you gotta work with the character because, he's so fast, he's powerful. It's a challenge because if you slow down just a bit the character, it naturally feels not natural because people are used to seeing him web swing all the way and fight very fast, quick pace. So we had to give satisfaction to those players. It means when you have working on a combat system, you need to have VFX to emphasize the speed of Spider-Man.
While open-world Spider-Man games generally sold better than linear ones, Francois was adamant that both design structures present a unique opportunity for developers.
For me, both games work well. It's an incredible character to work with, and he can do so much. I don't have a preference because the reason maybe why we didn't start to work already on an open world game was because the previous one was Web of Shadow, and then 2 years before there was Spider-Man 3, and the possibilities of what you can do with an open world game seemed a bit repetitive, and we said, well, we can do more in a level-based game, that we can visit locations that are not possible in an open world game because you can be suddenly teleported to any part of the world you want. From a business standpoint, I guess open world games are the one that sold the best in the franchise, which makes sense to focus on those, and that's why the 2 games we did after as a studio were open world games.
So now the question is, what makes a good Spider-Man game? To streamline my closing thoughts on the many Spider-Man titles I played, I've narrowed down 3 core pillars I believe a Spider-Man game has to include to achieve success: open world design, style, and web. The dynamic objectives that brought Spider-Man 2's Manhattan to life were excellent devices for making the city feel alive, though as the series progressed, little headway was made to improve variety. These contextual instances are the most efficient way to communicate Spider-Man's responsibility to the city and also create conflict between his commitments as Peter Parker. The design of the open world extends to the general visual language of the city. Being able to swing around Queens and cross the bridge into New York City in Ultimate Spider-Man effectively created a diversity in its environments that I hope Insomniac take note from. The use of more confined linear environments could also encourage the implementation of stealth mechanics and in general provide a more focused design for pensive cinematic segments in the campaign. Spider-Man's charisma is so integral to the character and the overall tone. Web of Shadows suffered fatally from a poorly written, overly serious story, while Shattered Dimensions is at times propped up by its fantastic writing that brings the character to life better than any other Spider-Man game I played for this video.
Hi, Ma, and welcome to Pain Factor, the only show where you compete for your life.
And remember, viewers, I'm available for Black Ops missions, assassinations, and birthday parties.
I don't know what's weird, that this guy can somehow come back from the dead, or that they gave him a TV show.
The use of comic panels as a storytelling device was an excellent inclusion in Ultimate Spider-Man, and while Insomniac looked to be taking a fairly traditional cinematic approach to their adaptation, a sparing use of panels for emphasis would be a fantastic way of injecting reverence for the source material. The supporting cast is also a make or break situation. I wouldn't mind Black Cat having a character that amounts to more than a sex object, to be honest. I also suspect Insomniac will experiment with the player controlling Peter Parker in high school to build some kind of immersion, which would be a wise decision if they decide to do so. Probably the most integral component of any Spider-Man game, the web is the core ability that separates Spider-Man from every other superhero. The web has rarely been explored as its own individual mechanic, and its potential in gameplay is almost limitless. In combat alone, its practical application has a bevy of uses, whether to incapacitate thugs for non-lethal takedowns, to implement objects in the environment, which Insomniac's title seems to be already doing, and to swing enemies around with hilarious ragdoll physics. If Insomniac were to further innovate on Shattered Dimensions' stealth mechanics, the web is almost perfectly suited to inconspicuous playstyles, whether to move from A to B quickly or leave enemies dangling in a man-sized cocoon. I really wanted to avoid comparisons to the Arkham trilogy in this video, but its take on stealth gameplay would be a logical jumping off point for Insomniac's Spider-Man. Lastly, and most importantly, the web swing is the single most integral mechanic for making Spider-Man games come to life. To take web slinging to the next level, all that's truly needed is a greater variety of animation variables to make the mechanic more dynamic. While it's quite easy to be fearful Insomniac will ruin the web slinging, I have confidence they know exactly how to execute the mechanic. If Insomniac can nail these three core pillars, they will be well on their way to making the best Spider-Man title ever conceived, and with such a rich pedigree and what is likely the biggest budget ever allocated to a Spider-Man title, I think fans everywhere are expecting it to be. But let me know in the comments below what your favourite Spider-Man game ever is, and what you're most looking forward to in Insomniac's new Spider-Man game. But thanks so much for watching, guys. Subscribe, like, and share if you enjoyed the video, and until next time, see ya.